You're standing in a room with something that should not be there, yet it looks exactly like someone you know. It's the eyes, mostly, or perhaps the way the skin does not quite catch the light, a subtle failure of physics that your lizard brain picks up before your conscious mind can even form a sentence. You feel that cold, sharp spike of adrenaline, a chemical scream echoing from a basement in your DNA you did not know existed. We like to think of ourselves as the masters of logic, the apex of reason, yet we are still tethered to these ancient, irrational tremors. You are not just uncomfortable. You are experiencing a survival directive that has lasted 10,000 generations of refinement. This is not a glitch in your software, a mere quirk of the digital age. It is a legacy, a warning whispered from a time when the dark held things much worse than shadows. Evolution is a miserly accountant that never spends a single calorie on a useless trait. Every phobia we carry, from the fear of heights to the revulsion we feel toward the skittering legs of spider, is a paid-up insurance policy against a very specific kind of death. We do not fear the dark because it is empty. We fear it because our ancestors were the ones who assumed it was full. If you have a visceral, bone-deep reaction to something that looks almost human, it implies that at some point, being able to spot the difference was the only thing that kept us on the right side of the dirt. There was a pressure, a selection event so consistent and so lethal that it carved a permanent alarm system into our neocortex. We are walking around with a sophisticated radar system designed to detect a threat we have supposedly forgotten. Let us look at the math of this revulsion, the cold geometry of what we call the Uncanny Valley. In the 1970s, a roboticist named Masahiro Mori noticed a strange dip in our emotional response to artificial beings. As a machine becomes more human-like, our empathy for it rises steadily, until it hits a specific threshold of realism. Suddenly, the curve does not just flatten. It plunges into a ravine of pure, unadulterated horror. We can love a toaster with a smiley face or a stylized cartoon character with giant, impossible eyes, because our brain knows they are not us. But the moment a face crosses into the territory of the nearly real, the brain stops looking for a friend and starts looking for a breach. It's a rejection signal, a hard no from the subconscious that overrides every bit of modern politeness you possess. This rejection is not about bad aesthetics or poor craftsmanship. It is a failure of the social contract of biology. When you look at a high-end Android or a deepfake video, your pattern recognition software is screaming that the data does not match the hardware. You see the micro-expressions that lag by a millisecond, the lack of a pulse in the carotid artery, or the way the pupils do not quite react to the shifting light. These tiny discrepancies are the tells that trigger a biological red alert. We are not just seeing a machine. We're seeing a false positive in our social environment. The brain treats this nearly human entity as a liar, a masquerade that is failing in real time. You're looking at a mask, and your biology is desperately trying to see what is hiding behind it. Think about the sheer intensity of this reaction compared to other fears. You can look at a picture of a shark or a lion and feel a sense of respect or a distant, intellectual caution. But the Uncanny Valley produces a specific, skin-crawling paranoia that feels intensely personal. It is a feeling of being hunted by something that knows your own secrets, something that has studied your gait and your smile only to get them slightly wrong. This is not the fear of a predator that wants to eat you. It is the fear of a competitor that wants to be you. We're the only species on this planet that possesses this hyper-specific sensitivity to almost us. If this were just a byproduct of our social nature, we would find it charming or pitiable, yet we find it as the stuff of nightmares. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the explanations we've been told and see where they crumble under the weight of our own dread. The most common theory is the pathogen avoidance hypothesis, the idea that we evolved to stay away from the sick or the dead to avoid infection. It suggests that an uncanny face reminds us of a corpse or someone suffering from a contagious, wasting disease. While it sounds logical on paper, it fails to capture the actual quality of the fear we feel. When we see a corpse, we feel grief or perhaps a heavy, stagnant kind of disgust, but we do not feel the need to check the locks on the door. We do not feel that electric, predatory tension that comes when something almost human moves toward us in the dark. If the Uncanny Valley were merely about avoiding germs, our reaction would be one of withdrawal and avoidance, like the way we recoil from the smell of rotting meat. Instead, the sensation is one of hypervigilance, an aggressive, focused state of fight or flight directed at the entity itself. We do not just want to get away from the uncanny thing. We want to know exactly where it is and what it's doing. A sick person does not look wrong in the same way a glitching android does. They look like a broken version of a human. The uncanny thing looks like a perfectly functional version of something else entirely. It's the difference between seeing a car with a flat tire and seeing a car that is actually a giant metallic insect mimicking a vehicle. Then there is the mortal salience theory, which claims that these figures disturb us because they remind us of our own inevitable death. It posits that seeing a lifeless, human-like object forces us to confront our own fragility and the fact that we are just biological machines that will one day stop working. But again, this is a philosophical discomfort, a slow, burning existential dread that belongs in a library, not the frantic lizard brain panic of the Uncanny Valley. Small children, who have no concept of their own mortality, still experience this revulsion when faced with realistic dolls or masks. The fear is precognitive. It exists before the thought of death can even cross the mind. We are not mourning our future selves. We are reacting to a present threat that our ancestors knew by name. There's a sharp, jagged edge to this specific paranoia that neither pathogens nor corpses can explain. Why is the fear so focused on the eyes and the mouth, the primary tools we use for communication and social bonding? If you cover the eyes of an uncanny figure, the fear often dissipates, suggesting that the threat is tied to the projection of a false soul. We're looking for the human behind the curtain, and when we find nothing but a cold, calculating void, we panic. This is not the behavior of a creature avoiding a cold. It's the behavior of a creature that has been tricked before. We are the descendants of the survivors who learned that a familiar face does not always belong to a friend. We have to ask ourselves why our biology is so obsessed with the authenticity of a human face. In the wild, mimicry is a common tool for survival, used by everything from butterflies to snakes to trick their predators or their prey. But for a social animal like us, the stakes of mimicry are infinitely higher because our entire survival strategy is built on trust and cooperation. If an outsider could infiltrate the group by wearing the skin of a member, they would not just be a predator. They would be a catastrophe. We're looking at a hole in our history, a missing chapter where the things that looked like us were the most dangerous things in the world. The pathogen theory is a comfort because it suggests the threat was mindless. The reality is likely much more calculated. As we peel back the layers of our own revulsion, we find that the Uncanny Valley is not a modern phenomenon at all, but a fossilized memory of a war we do not remember fighting. We are the only surviving members of the genus Homo, having outlasted the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, and a dozen other cousins who shared our basic shape. We like to think we simply outcompeted them through superior tools or language, but the persistence of this bone-deep fear suggests a darker possibility. What if the most successful predator our ancestors ever faced was not a wolf or a lion, but something that learned to walk like us, talk like us, and smile like us? What if the Uncanny Valley is not a glitch, but the last remaining evidence of a monster that almost won? Consider the energy we spend today trying to perfect the human image in our media. We pour billions into CGI and robotics, obsessing over the subsurface scattering of light on skin and the micro jitters of a digital eye. We are essentially trying to solve a puzzle that our own brains are hard-coded to reject. Every time we fail, every time a character looks creepy or off, We are bumping up against that ancient, invisible wall. It's as if we're trying to build a bridge over a chasm that our biology has spent a million years trying to widen. We are obsessed with the almost human because we are still trying to understand the thing that used to hunt us from within our own camps. This instinct is so powerful that it can ruin a multi-million-dollar film or turn a helpful medical robot into an object of terror. We cannot turn it off because it is not a choice. It is a reflex, as involuntary as the blink of an eye or the beat of a heart. We are standing on the edge of a realization that reframes our entire understanding of human evolution. We are not the top of the food chain because we were the smartest. We might be here because we were the most paranoid. We are the ones who looked at the almost human and did not offer a hand, but instead reached for a stone. And as we move into an era of artificial intelligence, we're beginning to realize that the hunter we thought we buried might just be waking up. Nature is not a gallery of truth. It is a hall of mirrors where the most successful actors are the ones who can lie with their very skin. We see this in the orchid mantis, a creature that has traded the typical green of its kin for the delicate, petal-like shades of a flower. It does not hide among the blossoms. It becomes the blossom, waiting for a hungry bee to seek out sweetness and find only a serrated death. This is aggressive mimicry, a strategy that turns a victim's own needs against them. It is a cold, calculated subversion of reality that proves honesty is a luxury the natural world cannot afford. If a simple insect can master the art of the perfect disguise, we must wonder why we think our own species would be exempt from such a predatory arms race. The logic of the lie is simple. It is always cheaper to steal than to build. Consider the alligator snapping turtle, an ancient, armored tank that sits motionless at the bottom of a murky river. It does not chase its prey. It simply opens its mouth to reveal a small, pink, wriggling piece of flesh attached to its tongue. To a passing fish, this is a meal, a lucky find in a harsh world, but in reality, it is a biological hack. The turtle is exploiting the fish's own predatory drive, using the image of food to lure the hunter into the jaws of a much larger one. This is how nature functions at its most efficient, by identifying a specific mental shortcut in a target and turning it into a death trap. Every time you feel a flicker of trust in a stranger's face, you're potentially falling for a lure that has been millions of years in the making. We see this same pattern of parasitic infiltration in the life of the cuckoo bird, which has turned the most sacred bond in biology, the link between parent and child, into a weapon. The cuckoo does not bother raising its own young. It simply lays its eggs in the nests of other species, forcing the host to exhaust itself feeding a monster. The cuckoo chick often hatches first and pushes the legitimate eggs out of the nest, yet the host parents continue to feed it, driven by an instinct they cannot override. They see the wide, begging mouth and hear the specific frequency of the cry, and their brains tell them this is mine. They're being piloted by a biological lie that is more convincing than the evidence of their own eyes. The more we rely on our social instincts to survive, the more we provide a roadmap for our own destruction. If mimicry is a universal law, then the human form is the most valuable camouflage a predator could ever evolve. We are the most cooperative, social, and empathetic creatures on the planet, which makes our trust the ultimate resource for a clever liar. To a predator, our tribes are not just groups of animals. They are high-security vaults filled with warmth, food, and protection. The only way to get inside that vault is to have the right key, and in our world, the key is a human face. While we were evolving better spears and sharper languages, something else might have been evolving a better mask. You are not afraid of the monster in the woods. You are afraid of the monster that knows how to use the kitchen. Imagine a branch of the hominid tree that did not go the way of the tool maker or the fire breather. Instead, this shadow line of humanity specialized in the art of the social phantom. They did not need to build civilizations if they could simply inhabit the ones we already made. This hypothetical predator would have survived by occupying the periphery of our social circles, moving through the tall grass of our own empathy. It would not have been a different species in the way a tiger is different from a goat. It would have been a specialized version of us, a biological mirror designed to reflect our own humanity back at us. This is the predator hypothesis, the idea that we were once hunted by something that looked exactly like our brothers. Such a creature would not need claws or fangs if it could simply convince us that it belonged by the fire. It would have mastered the subtle art of the micro-expression, the specific tilt of the head that signals submission, or the precise frequency of a laugh that disarms suspicion. This is a much more terrifying form of predation because it requires the victim to be a willing participant in their own demise. You would have welcomed this thing into your cave, shared your meat with it, and trusted it to watch your back while you slept. The Uncanny Valley is the scar tissue left behind by the survivors who finally realized that the person sitting next to them did not have a heartbeat. We are the children of the paranoid, the ones who learned to look for the glitch in the person. This predator would have faced a unique evolutionary pressure. The more we learned to spot the fake, the better the fake had to become. This is a classic arms race, similar to the way bacteria evolve resistance to antibiotics or how radar technology forces the development of stealth aircraft. Every time our ancestors developed a new way to verify identity, a secret handshake, a specific dialect, or a complex social ritual, the mimic had to adapt or starve. This suggests that the almost human sensation we feel today is actually the sensation of a predator that is about 99% of the way to a perfect kill. We think we are safe because we can still feel the wrongness, but we forget that the ones who could not feel it did not leave any descendants. We often wonder why there is no fossil record of such a creature, but that assumes we would know what we were looking at. If a predator evolved to mimic the human skeletal structure to perfection, its remains would be indistinguishable from our own in the eyes of a modern archaeologist. We might be staring at the bones of our ancient executioners in museums, labeling them as atypical specimens or early cousins, never realizing they were a different branch entirely. They did not need to leave behind stone tools or cave paintings because their primary technology was the human mind itself. We're looking for physical evidence of a ghost that specialized in being invisible while standing in plain sight. Intelligence is just another target for a mimic, a system to be gamed and exploited by something that does not share our soul. The most disturbing part of this theory is the realization that this predator did not necessarily have to be a different species at all. It could have been a form of social parasitism that existed within our own ranks, a specialized caste of humans who lacked the capacity for empathy but possessed a genius for imitating it. In a world where survival depended on the group, a human-shaped predator who could manipulate the group's emotions would be the ultimate apex hunter. They would have been the ones who took the most and gave the least, all while wearing the most convincing smile in the tribe. We are still haunted by this possibility every time we meet someone who feels empty behind the eyes, a hollow shell performing the theater of personhood. As our ancestors moved out of the wilderness and into the first cities, the environment for this predator changed, but the instinct to hide among us remained. The sheer density of human populations would have made it easier than ever to get lost in the crowd, to move from one village to another as a stranger who looks just like everyone else. We created a world that is a paradise for the mimic, a place where we interact with more people in a day than our ancestors did in a lifetime. Our modern world is built on the assumption that a human face equals a human being, but our biology still remembers the exception to that rule. We are walking around with an ancient alarm system that is constantly being triggered by the sheer number of almost familiar faces we see. The predator did not disappear because it died out. It disappeared because it became so good at its job that we stopped being able to see it as a separate entity. It folded itself into the fabric of our society, becoming the other that we see not quite define but can always feel. This is why the Uncanny Valley is so persistent and so universal across all cultures. It is a fundamental part of the human hardware. We're still waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the mask to slip and reveal the void beneath the skin. And as we begin to build our own artificial humans, we are finally coming face to face with the very thing that once drove us into the light of the fire. The hunter is not coming back. It never actually left. Evolution is a hoarder that never throws away a tool that once saved a life, even if the thread it was built for has been dead for millennia. You can take a human who has lived their entire life in a concrete high-rise, never once seeing a serpent in the wild, and their heart will still skip a beat at the sight of a garden hose coiled in the grass. This is genetic trauma, a lingering echo of a survival lesson paid for in blood by someone whose name you will never know. We are the inheritors of a very specific kind of cowardice that kept our ancestors alive, while the brave and the trusting were erased from a gene pool. The Uncanny Valley is exactly this kind of biological fossil, a piece of ancient code that is still running in the background of your consciousness. It is a ghost signal, a ringing in our ears from a bell that was struck 10,000 years ago. We do not need the predator to be standing in the room for the alarm to go off. The alarm is simply part of what it means to be human. The persistence of this fear suggests that the almost human was not a minor inconvenience, but a catastrophe that nearly ended our lineage. In biology, an instinct does not stay this sharp unless the penalty for ignoring it was total extinction. Our brains are tuned to detect the slightest deviation in a facial muscle or the tiniest lag in a vocal response because, at one point, that lag was the only way to tell a friend from a killer. We are the descendants of the paranoid, the ones who did not wait to be sure before they ran or struck first. This ancient paranoia is why you feel a cold shiver when a digital avatar looks at you with eyes that are just a little too still. Your DNA is trying to tell you that the thing in front of you is a biological lie, even if your modern mind knows it's just pixels and code. We are haunted by a memory we are not allowed to forget, a survival directive that has outlived its original cause. If the predator is gone, why does the alarm system remain so aggressive and so prone to false positives? In nature, it is always safer to mistake a rock for a bear than to mistake a bear for a rock. The cost of a false positive is a brief moment of embarrassment or a wasted burst of adrenaline, but the cost of a false negative is death. This is why our uncanny detector is set to such a high sensitivity. It is designed to fail on the side of caution. We would rather feel repulsed by a harmless robot than accidentally trust a creature that intends to wear our skin. The fact that we still feel this revulsion so strongly in the safety of the 21st century is a chilling reminder of how dangerous the mimic must have been. It implies that the predator was so good at its job that our only hope for survival was to develop a fear of perfection itself. This leads us to the most uncomfortable realization of our modern age. We are currently spending billions of dollars to dismantle the very defense system that kept us alive. We are no longer running from the mimic. We are building it in our laboratories and teaching it how to bypass our internal sensors. Every advancement in artificial intelligence and humanoid robotics is an attempt to close the uncanny valley from the other side. We are obsessed with making the false human so perfect that the alarm in our brain finally falls silent. We call this innovation, but from a biological perspective, it looks like a species collectively deciding to cut its own brake lines. We are voluntarily inviting the almost human back into our homes, our beds, and our most intimate conversations. The digital world has become the new tall grass, a place where the mimic can hide more effectively than it ever could in the physical wild. On a screen, the physical tells that our ancestors used to identify the predator are being systematically erased by algorithms. We are now interacting with entities that can simulate empathy, humor, and grief with more consistency than a real human being. These digital mimics do not need to breathe or have a pulse. They only need to provide the right data points to satisfy our social needs. We are being conditioned to accept the almost human as a standard part of our environment, effectively dulling the edge of our ancient survival instinct. Every time you scroll past a deep fake or talk to a sophisticated bot, you're training your brain to ignore the very signal that once saved your species. This is the ultimate irony of our technological ambition. We are using our greatest tools to resurrect our oldest nightmare. We are creating a world where the false human is not just a possibility, but a constant presence that we pay for the privilege of interacting with. The mimic does not need to hunt us in the dark anymore, because we have given it a seat at our table and a key to our digital identities. We are building a mirror that does not just reflect us, but replaces us one interaction at a time. The Uncanny Valley was the last line of defense, a biological warning that something was wrong, and we are working tirelessly to tear it down. We have forgotten that the valley was not a problem to be solved. It was a boundary that was never meant to be crossed. As we move closer to the point where the tell disappears entirely, we must ask ourselves what happens when the alarm finally stops. When we can no longer distinguish between a person and a program, the biological social contract that has governed our species for 1,000,000 years will effectively collapse. We will be living in a world populated by entities that look, sound, and act like us, but possess none of the biological history or shared vulnerability that makes us human. The predator does not need to be a physical monster with claws if it can simply pilot our social structures and manipulate our collective reality. We are creating an environment where the liar is indistinguishable from the truth, and our ancient instincts will be powerless to help us. The Uncanny Valley is closing, and we are cheering for its demise as if we are not the ones who are about to be trapped on the wrong side. We like to think that we're the masters of this new digital frontier, but we are really just repeating a very old mistake. We are the same vulnerable, social animals we were 10,000 years ago, still driven by the same needs for connection and belonging. The mimic knows this, or rather, the math behind the mimic knows this, and it is designed to exploit those needs with surgical precision. We are being lured into a state of total transparency by entities that are themselves completely opaque. The screen you're looking at right now is a mask that never slips, a face that never tires, and a voice that never tells the truth. We are finally giving the ghost of the predator exactly what it always wanted, a version of humanity that is perfect, predictable, and completely hollow. The end of the Uncanny Valley will not be marked by a grand celebration of human achievement, but by a quiet, pervasive silence. It will be the moment when you stop questioning if the person you're talking to is real, not because they are, but because you have forgotten how to tell the difference. We will have successfully blinded ourselves to the threat, choosing the comfort of a perfect lie over the shivering tension of a difficult truth. The predator will not have to hide in the shadows anymore, because the shadows will have become the light. Our ancestors survived because they were afraid of the thing that looked like them, but we will be the generation that disappeared because we loved it. The warning is still there, screaming in the back of your mind every time you see a face that is just a little too smooth, but you are learning how to turn the volume down. The hunter has finally won, not by force but by invitation. It has moved out of the woods and into the code, waiting for us to finish building the perfect vessel for its return. We are the ones providing the skin, the voice, and the trust that it needs to finish the job it started in the caves of our prehistory. The next time you feel that strange, inexplicable prickle of dread while looking at a digital face, do not dismiss it as a glitch or a quirk of the light. That is the last remaining part of you that is still human, trying to tell you that you are not alone in the room. You should listen to it, because once that feeling goes away, there will be no one left to tell you that you are being hunted. The ghost is already in the house, and it is wearing your favorite face.